Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The camera fell from my hands and shattered on the concrete path. Not because I dropped it, but because something pulled it down. Something that didn't want its picture taken. And now, as I'm recording this at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, I need to tell you why you should never, ever try to photograph anything at Resurrection Cemetery in Justice, Illinois. But wait, before I continue, if you're listening to this alone in the dark right now, you might want to turn on a light. Trust me on this one, because what I'm about to share isn't just another ghost story. This actually happened to me last Tuesday night, and I have the hospital bills to prove it. If you're still here, hit that subscribe button, not because I want views, but because you need to know what's out there, what's waiting, and why some rules exist for a reason. All right, deep breath. Here's where the story really begins. My name is Marcus Webb, and I've been a freelance photographer in Chicago for about 8 years now. I specialize in what they call atmospheric photography. You know, abandoned buildings, foggy landscapes, places with character. The kind of shots that end up in coffee table books nobody actually reads, but everyone displays. Last Monday, I got an email from Chicago Paranormal magazine. They wanted a photo series on local haunted locations for their October issue. Good money, $1,500 per location, 5 locations total. The catch? They wanted authentic nighttime shots with natural ambience. Translation: go to creepy places after dark and hope nothing goes wrong. The editor, Janet Kowalski, had been very specific about what she wanted. "We're not looking for tourist shots, Marcus," she'd said over the phone, her voice carrying that no-nonsense Chicago accent. "We want the real deal. The kind of photos that make people feel like they're standing there at midnight. Can you handle that?" Of course I said yes. Ego and empty bank account make a dangerous combination. The first 4 locations were easy. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, got some great fog shots. The pond there has this way of creating mist that looks almost alive in photographs. Spent 3 hours waiting for the perfect moment when the moonlight hit the water just right. The Congress Plaza Hotel captured some interesting shadows in the hallways. The security guard, an older guy named Bill, even told me about room 441, where guests always complain about someone watching them sleep. Got permission to photograph it, nothing unusual in the viewfinder, but when I reviewed the shots later, there was definitely something in the mirror that shouldn't have been there. Graceland Cemetery, beautiful monuments under moonlight. The Eternal Silence statue, there, has this hooded figure that seems to follow you with its hidden gaze. Perfect for the magazine. The old Ashburn Railroad tracks, atmospheric as hell. You can still see the burn marks on some of the remaining ties from the crash in '72. Each location had its own personality, its own kind of darkness. But they were manageable, like they understood the transaction. I take their picture, give them a moment of attention, and we part ways peacefully. But the 5th location, Resurrection Cemetery, that's where everything went sideways. I'd actually tried to convince Janet to let me substitute a different location. What about the site of the Eastland disaster, I'd suggested? Or the old Cook County Hospital? Both have great visual potential. Nope, she'd cut me off. The readers voted. They want Resurrection Cemetery. They want to see where Mary walks. Besides, she paused, and I could hear her lighting one of her ever-present cigarettes. I've had 3 photographers back out of that one already, starting to think they're all getting spooked by stories. You're not the type to get spooked by stories, are you, Marcus? Pride. It'll get you every time. See, I'd heard the stories. Everyone in Chicago knows about Resurrection Mary, the hitchhiking ghost in the white dress who asks for rides home from dances only to vanish at the cemetery gates. Classic urban legend stuff. What I didn't know What nobody talks about is the other rule, the one about cameras. I did my research before going. I spent hours reading about Resurrection Cemetery online. Established in 1904, it's one of the largest cemeteries in the Chicago area. Over 155,000 burials. The main gate on Archer Avenue has this distinctive Art Deco style that photographers love. During the day, it's actually quite beautiful. Peaceful, even. But it's not the daytime visits people talk about. The Resurrection Mary legend goes back to the 1930s. Most common story says she was a young Polish girl named Mary Bregovi, who died in a car accident after a night of dancing at the O. Henry Ballroom. Now, the Willowbrook. Since then, hundreds of people have reported picking up a young woman in a white dress along Archer Avenue. She asks for a ride, directs them past Resurrection Cemetery, then vanishes. Some say she asks to be let out at the gates. Others say she simply disappears from the car. But in my research, I found other stories, older ones. Stories that didn't make it into the tourist guides. There was a groundskeeper in the 1960s who quit after finding his camera equipment arranged in a circle around a fresh grave. He'd left it in his truck overnight, locked. Every photo on the roll showed the same thing. A view from inside a coffin, looking up. A newspaper photographer in 1978 was found unconscious near the mausoleum. When he woke up, he kept asking why no one else could see all the people watching. His camera was never found, but his assistant developed the film from his spare camera. Every frame was double exposed with faces that matched headstones from the 1920s section. And then there was the doctoral student from University of Chicago in 1995. She was doing a thesis on cemetery symbolism and spent weeks photographing monuments. Her advisor found her work. Thousands of photos. But she was gone. The photos started normal, but as they progressed, shadows appeared in them. Human-shaped shadows that got clearer and more numerous with each shot. The last photo showed the student surrounded by these shadows, her face twisted in a scream the camera somehow captured but no one heard. I told myself these were just stories, urban legends building on urban legends, the kind of thing that happens when you mix tragedy, history, and human imagination. I was wrong. I arrived around 11 p.m. on Tuesday. October air had that perfect chill. You know, the kind that makes you pull your jacket tighter but doesn't quite make you shiver. The cemetery gates were closed, obviously, but there's a spot where the fence is low enough to hop if you're careful. Not that I'm advocating trespassing, but deadline was Wednesday morning and I needed those shots. The moment I landed on the other side of that fence, something felt different. You ever walk into a room and just know someone was talking about you? That sudden silence that feels heavy? That's what the entire cemetery felt like I'd interrupted something. Private. I pulled out my Canon 5D, my baby, the camera that had been with me through 1,000 shoots. The weight of it usually comforted me. Professional equipment, professional results. But that night it felt heavier somehow, like it didn't want to be there either. The main path stretched ahead, lined with old oaks that created a natural tunnel. Perfect for a moody shot. I raised the camera, adjusted the settings for low light, and click. Nothing. The camera was on. Battery full. Memory card empty, but it wouldn't take the shot. I checked the settings again. Everything looked normal. Tried again, click, still nothing. That's when I noticed the temperature drop. Not gradual, but sudden, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. My breath came out in clouds, which made no sense because it was maybe 50 degrees that night. Probably just a malfunction, I muttered to myself. You do that when you're alone in the dark. Talk to yourself like it makes things more normal. Just need to reset it. I turned the camera off, counted to 10, turned it back on. The screen flickered, showing not the menu, but static, like old TV static, except cameras don't do that. Digital cameras especially don't do that. Then, through the static, I saw something that made my hands go numb. A face. Not a clear face, more like an impression. Like someone pressing their face against frosted glass. It lasted maybe 2 seconds before the screen went black. I should have left right then. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run. But I had a deadline, bills to pay. And part of me, the skeptical part, was trying to rationalize it. Electronic interference, maybe someone was running some kind of equipment nearby. Cemetery maintenance or something. So, I kept walking deeper into the cemetery. The headstones got older as I moved away from the entrance. Modern granite gave way to weathered limestone, names barely readable after decades of Chicago winters. The path split into smaller trails, and I chose the one leading toward the older section. If I was going to get atmospheric shots, might as well go for the most atmospheric area. That's when I saw him. An old man, maybe 70, sitting on a bench near a cluster of Victorian-era monuments. At first, I thought he was homeless, but his clothes were too clean, too old-fashioned, like he'd stepped out of a 1950s photograph. "You shouldn't have that here," he said without looking at me. I stopped about 10 feet away. "Sorry, I didn't know anyone else was here. I'm just taking some photos for a magazine." "I said you shouldn't have that here." He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes. God, his eyes were completely white. Not blind white, but like someone had erased the irises and pupils. Especially not that kind. "What kind?" I asked, even though every cell in my body wanted to back away. He stood up slowly, joints creaking like old floorboards. "The kind that steals. The kind that takes what ain't meant to be taken. It's just a camera." "Is it?" He took a step closer, and I noticed he wasn't leaving footprints in the dew-covered grass. "Tell me, boy, you ever wonder why some old folks don't like having their pictures taken? Why some cultures think cameras steal souls?" I laughed. Nervous laughter, but laughter nonetheless. "That's just superstition." "Superstition?" He said the word like it tasted bad. "That's what you young folks call wisdom you don't understand yet." He gestured to the graves around us. "These people, they're at rest. But your machine, it disturbs things, pulls at things, makes them remember they're supposed to be somewhere else. Look, I don't mean any disrespect. Respect ain't the issue." He was close enough now that I could see he wasn't breathing. No little puffs of vapor in the cold air like mine. "The issue is what happens when you point that thing at something that don't want to be seen. When you try to capture something that's already been captured once, by death." He reached out toward my camera, and I instinctively pulled it back. "There's rules here," he continued. "Rules older than this cemetery, older than Chicago itself. You can visit, you can pay respects, you can leave flowers. But you don't take pictures, not of the graves, not of the monuments, and especially—" He paused, looking over my shoulder. "Not of them." I turned around. The path behind me was empty. When I turned back, so was the bench. The old man was gone. Not walking away, just gone. Like he'd never been there at all. My hands were shaking as I checked my camera. Still wouldn't take photos, but now the screen was working normally, showing the regular menu, battery still full. But something was different. The photo counter showed 47 images. I hadn't taken a single shot since arriving. I scrolled to the gallery, and what I saw made my throat close up. Photo after photo of nothing. Not black frames, not error messages. Nothing. Like the camera had been taking pictures of absence itself. Each timestamp showed they'd been taken in the last 20 minutes, while I'd been walking and talking to the old man. But the last photo, the 47th, that one was different. It showed me, standing on the path, camera raised. Except I was transparent, see-through, like a double exposure, but digital cameras don't do double exposures. And behind my transparent form, filling the space where my solid body should have been, were faces. Dozens of them, all staring at the camera, all angry. My finger hit the delete button before I could think. Error message. The photo wouldn't delete. I tried again, same error. Tried formatting the memory card. Error. That's when the whispers started. You know how in movies, ghost voices are always clear, distinct words you can understand? Real whispers aren't like that. They're like wind through leaves. If wind could carry malice. Like static taking shape just enough to scratch at your brain. They were coming from everywhere and nowhere. Behind headstones. Under the ground. Inside my own head. And they were getting louder, but worse than the whispers were the images filling my mind. Not my thoughts. Theirs. Flashes of moments I'd never lived. A woman in a Victorian dress collapsing at a piano, her fingers still trying to play as she died. A child reaching for a balloon as fever took him. An old man counting money in a study, not noticing the figure behind him with the knife. Death after death after death, each one demanding to be seen, to be witnessed, to be photographed. I understood then what the old man meant. These weren't just graves, they were stories, final chapters, and my camera. Somehow, my camera was trying to read them all at once. I started walking back toward the entrance. Not running. Running felt like it would trigger something. Like when you're a kid and you know the monster under the bed can't get you if you don't let your feet dangle. Stupid logic. But in that moment, it felt like the only thing keeping me safe. The path seemed longer going back, the trees closer together, the shadows deeper, and my camera, it was getting hot. Not warm from use, but actually hot. Like it was fighting against something. I passed a section of children's graves. Tiny headstones with lambs and angels. And the camera practically burned my hands. The LCD screen flickered, showing glimpses of things that weren't there. A teddy bear on a grave that was bare. Flowers that had long since rotted away. A woman in a 1940s dress, kneeling and sobbing at a stone too weathered to read. Then the screen turned on by itself. More photos were appearing in the gallery. 48, 49, 50, each one showing me walking, but with more transparency, more faces filling the space where I should be solid. They were using my camera to document my disappearance, absorption. I didn't have a word for what I was seeing, but I could feel it happening. With each photo, I felt less, like something was being siphoned away. My memories seemed distant. My name felt foreign in my mind. I looked at my hands and could swear I saw the cemetery path through them. At photo 65, I broke into a run. The whispers became screams, not loud screams, worse than that. Screams at the frequency of thought. Screams that bypassed my ears and went straight to the primitive part of my brain that understood danger. And the screams had words now. Names, dates, final words. Tell my daughter the money is hidden in... I didn't mean to. Please, God, not yet. A cacophony of unfinished business, all trying to use me as their medium. The cemetery path twisted in ways it hadn't before. Graves appeared where there had been grass. Monuments loomed out of shadows that shouldn't have been that dark. The angel statues. Christ, the angel statues were turning their heads to watch me pass, stone eyes tracking my movement. Marble fingers pointing the way. But was it toward the exit or deeper into the maze? And through it all, my camera kept taking pictures. Click, 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 89 photos, 90, 91. Each click felt like a heartbeat being stolen. Each flash, wait, the flash wasn't going off, so why was I seeing flashes? No, not flashes. Faces. Translucent faces superimposed over reality, getting clearer with each shot. They were using my vision like a viewfinder, composing their final portrait. I stumbled over a raised grave marker, went down hard, skinned my palms on the gravel. When I pushed myself up, my hands left no prints in the dirt. That's when the panic really hit. I wasn't just losing my photos. I was losing my physical presence, being developed in reverse, fading from existence one exposure at a time. I could see the entrance gate ahead, the low spot in the fence where I'd climbed over. Just 50 feet, 40, 30. That's when I saw her. Resurrection Mary had to be. White dress, long blonde hair, standing right at the gate. Except she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at my camera with an expression of absolute terror. "Don't," she said, and her voice was like frost forming on glass. "Don't let them finish." "Finish what?" I gasped, still running. "The collection. They're collectors of moments, of final moments. And you," she pointed at my camera, "you gave them a way in. 97 photos. 98, 99. I understood then. 100. It was racing toward 100 photos, and something told me that when it hit that number, I did the only thing I could think of. I lifted the camera high and smashed it down on the concrete path. The screen cracked, the body split, the lens shattered, and the screaming. God, the screaming that came from that broken camera. Like I'd murdered something, like I'd torn apart a living thing. But it worked. The whispers stopped, the shadows pulled back. The path straightened out. Mary was still there, but she was smiling now. Sad, but smiling. "Run," she whispered. "Run and don't look back. And never, ever bring another camera here." I vaulted that fence like an Olympic athlete, hit the ground hard on the other side, felt something in my ankle give, but I didn't care. I limp ran to my car, threw myself inside, and peeled out of that parking lot like the devil himself was behind me. It wasn't until I was miles away, parked under a streetlight in a 24-hour grocery store parking lot, that I realized I was crying. I didn't go home that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those faces in the photos. Angry, hungry, collecting. Instead, I drove to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Told them I'd fallen while urban exploring, twisted my ankle. They x-rayed it, hairline fracture. While I waited for the results, I used their Wi-Fi to research Resurrection Cemetery on my phone. What I found made my blood run cold. Turns out, the no photography rule isn't new. It goes back decades. Story after story on paranormal forums, urban exploration sites, local history blogs, cameras malfunctioning, photos showing things that weren't there, people getting sick after taking pictures. One photographer in 1987 reported that his entire portfolio, thousands of negatives, had somehow been replaced with images of graves he'd never photographed. But the worst story was from 2003. A wedding photographer named David Chen had been hired to do a Gothic-themed shoot in the cemetery. Illegal, but the couple was paying cash. He took exactly 100 photos before his assistant found him collapsed by a monument. He was alive, but changed. Kept talking about being collected, about faces in the viewfinder, about how they were almost complete, almost ready, almost. He never finished his sentences, never touched a camera again. Last anyone heard, he was living in a care facility in Elgin, spending his days drawing the same face over and over. A face nobody recognized. I found his assistant's Reddit post from 2019. She'd kept one of the memory cards from that night. Said she looked at it once, years later. The first 99 photos were normal. Gothic couple posing by headstones, dramatic shots with fog machines, typical edgy wedding stuff, but photo 100. She said photo 100 showed David standing among the graves, surrounded by people in old-fashioned clothes, all of them staring at the camera, all of them smiling. And David was transparent. She destroyed the memory card after that, burned it, then scattered the ashes in Lake Michigan. But she said sometimes, in her dreams, she still sees that last photo. And each time David is a little more faded, a little less there. I cleared my browser history and tried to forget what I'd read. The next morning, or I guess technically later that morning since it was already 4 a.m., I called Chicago Paranormal magazine. Told them I'd had an equipment malfunction and lost all the photos. They weren't happy, but equipment failure happens. They'd find another photographer for Resurrection Cemetery. Actually, I said before hanging up, maybe skip that location. I heard they're really strict about trespassing there. Lots of security. Might not be worth the legal risk. Janet laughed, that raspy smoker's laugh. Security? Marcus, I've got 3 photographers who've told me the same thing this week. Starting to think you're all making excuses. What really happened out there? I wanted to tell her. Wanted to warn her. But how do you explain that a cemetery collects moments? That it feeds on final breaths captured in silver and silicon? That somewhere in that place, 99 souls are waiting for one more photograph to complete their gallery? Just trust me, I said finally. Find somewhere else, anywhere else. She hung up without agreeing. I found out later she went herself, armed with her iPhone and a determination to prove us all wrong. She came back, but she won't talk about what happened. Won't use her phone camera anymore either. Says it's broken, but I've seen her flinch when someone tries to take her picture. It was a weak lie, but maybe it would keep someone else from going through what I did. I thought that would be the end of it. Broken camera, broken ankle, broken nerve. I'd stick to daylight photography from now on. Nature shots, weddings, safe things. But that was before the dream started. Every night, the same dream. I'm back in the cemetery, but this time I'm not alone. There are others with cameras. Dozens of us. All walking the paths like we're in some kind of procession. We don't speak. Can't speak. Our cameras are fused to our hands, clicking away on their own. And with each photo, we fade a little more. In the dream, I always end up at the same grave. A simple headstone that reads, "Reserved." No name, no dates, just that one word. And I know, somehow I know, it's waiting for whoever takes the 100th photo. 3 days after the cemetery, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address, no delivery service markings, just a plain brown box that had somehow appeared on my doorstep between me checking the mail at 2 p.m. and coming home from physical therapy at 4 p.m. My hands shook as I opened it. Part of me already knew what would be inside. It was a memory card. My memory card. The one from the destroyed camera. And a note. Handwritten in old-fashioned script. The collection remains incomplete, 99 of 100. They are waiting. Below that, in different handwriting. Dozens of different handwriting styles, actually, all cramped together on the same page. Were names. David Chen, Sarah Morrison, Franklin Davies, Maria Santos. Names and dates going back decades. Each one followed by the same notation. 99 of 100. I recognized some of the names from my research. The photographers who'd tried and failed. Who'd gotten close but not close enough. Who'd escaped but left something behind. At the bottom of the page in fresh ink, so new it smudged when I touched it, was my name, Marcus Webb. And today's date. I should have destroyed it, burned it, thrown it in Lake Michigan, but curiosity, stupid, dangerous curiosity, made me put it in my laptop. 99 photos. Just like the note said. Each one showing my progressive transparency, my fading from reality as those faces grew clearer, more defined, more eager. But photo 99 was different from what I remembered. It wasn't me anymore. It was the old man from the bench. Solid. Real. Standing exactly where I'd been standing when I smashed the camera. And he was smiling. No, not smiling, looking relieved. Like someone who'd finally been allowed to put down a heavy burden. I zoomed in on his face, and that's when I saw it. The small detail that made my blood run cold. Pinned to his lapel was a photographer's press badge. the kind they used in the 1950s. The name was too faded to read, but the date was clear. October 1953. He'd been waiting there for 70 years, warning people, trying to save them from completing the collection, because he knew what happened when you became number 100. You became the next guardian, the next warning, the next voice in the darkness saying, "You shouldn't have that here." I ejected that memory card and put it in my safe. Haven't touched it since. Haven't touched any camera since. Switched to cell phone photography only, and even that makes me nervous. Because sometimes, usually around 3 a.m. when I can't sleep, I check that memory card, not to look at the photos, just to make sure it's still there, still contained. And every time I check, I hold my breath until I see the photo count. Still 99, still waiting. So that's why you can't take photos at Resurrection Cemetery. Not because of some arbitrary rule, not because of respect for the dead, but because something there collects, something that needs exactly 100 photos to complete its purpose, and whoever takes that 100th photo becomes part of the collection. If you're ever in Justice, Illinois, and you think about visiting Resurrection Cemetery, go ahead. Pay your respects. Leave flowers. Say a prayer if that's your thing. But leave your camera at home. Leave your phone in the car. Don't even bring a disposable. Because they're still waiting. Still collecting. Still one photo short, and they're very, very patient. Sweet dreams, everyone. And if you found this story helpful or terrifying, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who thinks ghost stories are just stories. And comment below if you've ever had a camera malfunction in a place it shouldn't have. Because I have a feeling I'm not the only one they've tried to collect. Until next time, sleep tight. And remember, some pictures are better left untaken. Oh, and one more thing. If you ever receive an unmarked package with a memory card inside, don't be curious. Just don't. Trust me on that one. Story number 2. Listen, before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand something. When people stop seeing you, when you literally fade from their vision while you're standing right there, it changes everything. Not just how they look at you, but how you look at yourself. So, here's my question for you. And I want you to really think about this before the story begins. If everyone around you started looking through you instead of at you, would you still know who you are? Would you still exist? Or would you become something else entirely? Drop your answer in the comments below, because by the end of this story, you might change your mind. All right, the story begins now. My name is Sarah Chen, and 3 weeks ago I started disappearing, not all at once. God, I wish it had been all at once. That would have been easier to handle, easier to explain. No, this was gradual. Like watching yourself dissolve in slow motion while everyone pretends it's not happening. It started at the Starbucks on Madison Avenue in Seattle, Tuesday morning, 7:43 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was checking my phone, waiting for my usual vanilla latte. The barista, this kid named Tyler, who'd been making my coffee for 2 years. He looked right through me. "Next customer," he called out, staring at the space where I stood. I waved my hand. "Tyler, I'm right here." His eyes, they tracked movement behind me, through me, like I was made of glass. The woman behind me stepped forward, her shoulder passing through mine, not bumping into me, through me. And the strangest part, I felt it, this cold sensation, like ice water trickling down my spine. "Ma'am?" Tyler was looking at her now. "What can I get you?" I stumbled backward, my hands shaking. The woman ordered a caramel macchiato, my usual spot at the counter. She stood there like I'd never existed. I ran to my car, sat there for 20 minutes, watching my hands. They looked solid to me, completely normal. 5 fingers, familiar scar on my left thumb from that cooking accident last year. I could see myself perfectly in the rearview mirror. Brown eyes, messy morning hair, that tiny mole above my right eyebrow. So, Why couldn't Tyler see me? I called in sick to work. Spent the day in my Queen Anne apartment, pacing between the kitchen and living room. Every few minutes I'd check the mirror. Still there. Still me. My cat, Mochi, followed me around like always, purring when I picked her up. "At least you can see me," I whispered into her fur. She meowed and rubbed her head against my chin. By evening, I'd convinced myself it was a fluke. Stress, maybe. I'd been working 60-hour weeks at the architectural firm, designing blueprints for the new waterfront development. Lack of sleep could make anyone hallucinate, right? I ordered Thai food from my favorite place on Capitol Hill. When the delivery driver arrived, I opened the door with a smile. "Hi. That was fast." He set the bag on my doormat without looking up, turned around, started walking away. "Wait," I called out. "Don't you need me to sign?" He kept walking, got in his car, drove away. The receipt was already signed, marked as contactless delivery. But I hadn't selected that option. I never did. That night, I called my best friend Emma. We'd known each other since college at UW, shared an apartment for 3 years before she got married. If anyone would give it to me straight, it would be her. "Em, something weird is happening." "Sarah, oh my God, I've been meaning to call you. How are you?" Her voice sounded different, distant, like she was talking to someone in another room. I'm not great, actually. Can we meet up? Maybe grab coffee tomorrow?" A pause. "I'd love to catch up. It's been, 6 months?" My stomach dropped. "Emma, we had lunch last week at that new place in Fremont." Another pause. Longer this time. You know what? My memory's been terrible lately. New baby and all. Text me tomorrow and we'll figure something out, okay?" She hung up before I could respond. I didn't sleep that night. Sat on my couch, laptop open, searching for anything that might explain what was happening. Medical conditions, psychological phenomena, paranormal experiences. Nothing fit. Around 3 a.m., I found a Reddit thread titled, "Is Anyone Else Becoming Invisible?" Posted 2 years ago. 3 comments, all deleted. The original poster's account was gone too. But I kept digging. Found fragments of similar stories scattered across obscure forums. People describing the sensation of becoming unanchored from reality. Most posts were deleted within hours of being made, but I managed to screenshot a few before they vanished. One stood out. Day 12, family photos on the mantle are changing. My face is blurring out, becoming indistinct. It's like reality is editing me out retroactively. Another. The reflection in shop windows shows everyone except me. I cast a shadow, but no reflection. What am I becoming? The next morning, I tested it systematically. First, the coffee shop across the street. Different place, different people. The result was the same. The cashier's eyes slid over me like I was empty space. Other customers walked where I stood, that same cold sensation washing through me each time. But here's the thing. I could still interact with objects. I picked up a newspaper from the stand, opened doors. My credit card worked when I tapped it on the reader. The transaction went through, but no one saw me do it. I realized I was becoming like a ghost in a machine, able to affect the digital world but invisible to human perception. I went to work anyway. What else was I supposed to do? The security guard at my building. Robert. He'd been greeting me every morning for 5 years. That day, he stared right through me as I badged in. The turnstile opened, but his friendly "Morning, Miss Chen" never came. The elevator ride felt endless. 23 floors of increasing dread. When the doors opened to our office, I almost turned around. Almost went home. But I needed to know how far this had spread. My desk was exactly as I'd left it. Coffee mug still unwashed, blueprints scattered across the surface. But my nameplate was gone. The photo of Emma and me at Pike Place Market disappeared. I sat down anyway, opened my computer. My login still worked, but My email inbox was empty, not just no new messages, empty. 5 years of correspondence gone. Hey, who's using Sarah's old desk? I turned. Marcus, from accounting, stood in my cubicle entrance, frowning at my computer screen. Marcus, it's me, Sarah. He pulled out his phone. Yeah, someone's at Chen's old station. No, I don't see who might be IT doing maintenance. Old station. Old. Like I was already gone, I spent the morning watching my coworkers. Really watching them. Noticed how they unconsciously avoided the spaces where I'd been. How conversations died when I approached, not because they saw me, but because something primitive in their brains sensed wrongness. Jennifer, from HR, walked past my desk 6 times. Each time, she slowed down, frowned, then hurried away. The 7th time, she stopped completely. This is so weird, she muttered to herself. I keep feeling like I'm forgetting something important. She stared at my desk for 30 seconds, then shook her head and walked away. I left at lunch. Couldn't stand the way conversations stopped when I walked by, not because people noticed me, but because they felt something. A cold spot, a disruption. One woman actually shivered and grabbed her cardigan when I passed. Outside, I nearly collided with a man rushing past. Except I didn't collide. He moved through me, and for a split second I saw myself reflected in his eyes. No, not myself, nothing. A void where a person should be. That afternoon I did something desperate. Went to the university district where street artists drew portraits for tourists. Found this older woman with kind eyes setting up her easel near the bookstore. "Excuse me," I said, knowing she wouldn't hear. Can you draw me?" I sat on the stool across from her anyway, stayed perfectly still for 20 minutes while she sketched. Watched her eyes track the space where I sat, her hand moving across the paper with practiced strokes. When she finished, she held up the portrait. It was beautiful. Every detail perfect. The curve of my jaw, the way my hair fell across my shoulders, even that tiny scar through my left eyebrow from childhood. But the eyes were wrong. Empty, hollow, like looking into windows of an abandoned house. She set the portrait down, confused, picked up her eraser. Started removing the features one by one until only the outline remained. A suggestion of a person, a ghost. Then she tore the paper in half and threw it away. I retrieved the pieces from the trash when she packed up. Taped them together with shaking hands. The portrait was mostly gone, but there was still an outline. Proof that something had been there, even if the artist's mind couldn't hold on to what it was. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook. Ended up at Gasworks Park, collapsed on a bench overlooking Lake Union. Sunset painted the water gold and crimson, and I wondered if this was how it ended. Not death, but erasure. Watching the world continue without you, beautiful and indifferent. My phone buzzed. Emma texting, "Hey, want to grab that coffee? I'm free tomorrow." Like our conversation yesterday never happened. Like I was already becoming a memory she couldn't quite hold on to. That night changed everything. I woke at exactly 2:17 a.m. Not gradually, suddenly, like someone had flipped a switch in my brain. Mochi was pressed against my bedroom door, growling. I'd never heard her make that sound before. "What is it, baby?" She hissed at me. Actually hissed. Her back arched, fur standing on end, eyes wide with animal terror. "Mochi, it's me." She yowled and scrambled under the bed. I stood up, and that's when I saw them. My hands in the moonlight streaming through the window. Still visible to me, but different. Translucent, I could see the bed sheets through my palms, the pattern distorted like looking through water. The bathroom mirror told the full story. I was fading. Not to others anymore, to myself. My reflection wavered like a bad signal. One moment clear, the next scattered into static. I pressed my hand against the glass and watched my fingers dissolve at the edges, reforming when I pulled back. No, 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 no. I grabbed my phone, called Emma, direct to voicemail, called my mom in Portland. Number disconnected, called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I need help, please. Something's happening to me. I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I'm not getting anything on this line. Please! Can you hear me? If anyone's there, please hang up and try again. The line went dead. I threw on clothes and drove downtown. The streets were empty except for a few late-night wanderers. I parked outside the ER at Harborview, ran through the automatic doors. The waiting room was half full. Tired faces under fluorescent lights. I went straight to the desk. Please help me. I think I'm disappearing. The nurse typed on her computer, eyes focused on something that wasn't me. I waved my hand in front of her face. Nothing. Slammed my palm on the desk. She didn't flinch. But the sound, everyone heard the sound. Heads turned, looking for the source, looking through me. A little girl in the corner started crying, pointing at where I stood. Mommy, Mommy, the lady. Shh, baby, there's no lady, but she's right there. She's all broken. Her mother pulled her close, whispering comfort. But the girl kept staring, tears streaming down her face. She could see something. Not me exactly, but the space I was failing to occupy. Children, I realized. Children could sense what adults couldn't. Their perception wasn't fully locked into the adult world's rigid definitions of what was possible. I left before security could investigate the disturbance. Sat in my car watching my hands flicker in and out of focus. The steering wheel felt solid beneath my fingers, but I couldn't shake the feeling that at any moment I might slip through it. Through everything. That's when I noticed the notebook in my passenger seat. My work journal, filled with project notes and sketches. I flipped it open. The pages were blank, not empty. Blank, like I'd never written anything at all. I drove home in silence. No music, no podcast. Just the sound of tires on wet asphalt and my own breathing, which seemed too loud in the enclosed space. Too real for someone who was ceasing to exist. Mochi was gone when I got back. Food bowl still full, water untouched. The apartment felt different without her. Larger, emptier. Like it was already forgetting I lived there. On my kitchen table I found a notice. Final notice, pet abandonment. The apartment complex was fining me for having an unregistered pet in the building. According to their records, I'd never filed the proper paperwork for Mochi, except I had. 2 years ago, I remembered the paperwork, the pet deposit, the whole process. But there was no record of it anywhere. I made coffee at 4 a.m., sat at my kitchen table watching the sun rise over Elliott Bay. The city waking up to another ordinary day. People would go to work, meet friends, fall in love. All the normal human things I was sliding away from. My laptop was open to that Reddit thread, still deleted, but I found others. Buried deep in obscure forums, hidden behind careful wording. People describing the sensation of becoming unanchored, of existing in the spaces between other people's perception. One comment stood out. It's not that you become invisible, it's that you become impossible. The world rejects the contradiction of your existence. The user had posted it 3 years ago. Their last activity was 3 years ago. But I kept reading. Found a pattern in the stories. People who described feeling disconnected from their lives before it started. Going through motions. Feeling like observers rather than participants. Like they were already becoming transparent long before anyone noticed. I need to tell you what happened next, even though you probably won't believe it. Even though I'm not sure I believe it myself. It's been a week since that night. 7 days of watching myself fragment and reform like a broken signal. I've stopped trying to interact with people. Stopped answering my phone, which rarely rings anyway. The calls that do come through are wrong numbers. Always wrong numbers. But yesterday I saw someone else. I was walking through Pioneer Square. Old habit. Used to get lunch there when I was solid enough for lunch to matter. The underground tour entrance caught my eye. That cheesy tourist attraction I'd always meant to try but never did. She was standing near the ticket booth. A woman about my age, staring at her hands the same way I'd been staring at mine, watching them flicker. "You can see me," she said. Not a question. I nodded, couldn't speak. "How long?" 3 weeks, I managed. She laughed, bitter, broken. 8 months for me. You're still new, still fighting it. We walked together, 2 impossibilities navigating the city. She told me her name was Rebecca, though she wasn't sure it mattered anymore. Said she'd been a teacher at Roosevelt High, said her students forgot her first, then colleagues, then family. "The forgetting is worse than the fading," she said. "Watching people you love look through you. Watching your life get erased one connection at a time." We passed a coffee shop. The barista shivered as we walked by. "Why can we see each other?" I asked. Rebecca shrugged. "Maybe because we're in the same space. The between space, or maybe..." She paused. "Maybe we need to see each other, to remember we existed." She showed me others. A man near the waterfront who'd been fading for 2 years. A teenager in Capitol Hill who'd started 3 days ago and was still crying, still calling for parents who couldn't hear her. An elderly woman in Ballard who'd been transparent for 6 months and had learned to find peace in it. "There are more every day," Rebecca said. "Whatever this is, it's spreading. We gathered in places people avoided. Abandoned buildings, empty lots, spaces that matched what we were becoming. And we talked, shared theories, compared experiences. The man by the waterfront was named David. Used to work in tech like half of Seattle. He'd been tracking the phenomenon, mapping where it started, how it spread. He'd created a digital journal, stored in the cloud, that somehow persisted even as physical evidence of our existence disappeared. "It's not random," he told us. "There's a pattern. We're all people who were already peripheral, introverts, observers, people who went through life without making deep connections." The teenager Maya disagreed. "That's not true. I had friends. I had a boyfriend. I was on the soccer team." "But were you really there?" David asked gently. "Or were you performing being there?" Maya's face crumpled. She didn't answer. The elderly woman, Helen, had a different theory. "I think we're the ones who questioned too much, who looked too deeply, who saw through the comfortable illusions that keep people anchored." She told us about her research into consciousness, quantum mechanics, the nature of reality itself. How she'd spent years studying the observer effect, the way perception shapes reality. "Maybe we perceived ourselves out of existence," she said. "Maybe we saw through the illusion of being solid, separate beings, and reality decided to make it literal. Some thought it was environmental, something in the water or air. Others believed it was psychological, a collective delusion that had somehow become real." Maya was still convinced we were dead, stuck in purgatory. But I kept thinking about that Reddit comment, about becoming impossible, and about David's map, the way the cases clustered around certain locations, near hospitals, near laboratories, near places where the boundary between life and death, between real and unreal, was already thin. We started meeting regularly, every night at midnight in the basement of an abandoned building in Soto. 7 of us now. 7 impossible people in a city of hundreds of thousands. We called ourselves the Forgotten. Not because we chose to be forgotten, but because forgetting seemed to be our essential nature. The thing that made us vulnerable to whatever was happening. David showed us security footage he'd hacked from around the city. Cameras captured us as blurs, distortions, gaps in the frame. But the interesting part was what happened to the footage afterward. Within hours, the digital files would corrupt. The blurs would disappear. Even digital reality was rejecting us. Rebecca had been keeping a journal, writing everything down by hand. The words stayed solid on paper longer than they did in digital form. She'd been documenting the stages of disappearance, creating a guide for newcomers. Stage 1. Others stop seeing you, but you can still see yourself normally. This lasts days to weeks. Stage 2. You start to become transparent to yourself. Your reflection wavers. This is when most people panic. Stage 3. You lose the ability to interact with digital systems. Your online presence starts to disappear. Stage 4. Physical evidence of your existence begins to vanish. Photos, documents, anything that proves you were here. Stage 5. You become fully transparent but still conscious. You can observe but not interact. This is as far as I've gotten. What's stage 6? I asked. Rebecca looked at the others. We don't know. No one's reported back from stage 6. Last night I made a decision. If I was going to fade completely, I wanted to understand why. So I went back to my apartment. What used to be my apartment. The door was unlocked. My furniture was gone. New tenants moving in. I found one box in the closet, labeled Previous Tenant, Unclaimed. Inside were photos, my whole life in snapshots, but in every picture there was a gap, a person-shaped hole where I should have been. Emma standing with her arm around nothing, my parents posing with empty space between them, except one photo, the oldest one. Me at 5 years old, Halloween night, dressed as a ghost in a white sheet. You could see me perfectly. Solid, real, grinning through the eye holes. On the back in my mother's handwriting. Sarah's first Halloween, she insisted on being invisible. I brought the photo to our meeting, showed it to the others. Helen studied it with the intensity of a scientist examining a crucial specimen. This is significant, she said. You chose invisibility as a child. Maybe that choice created a resonance, a vulnerability to this phenomenon. We compared childhood memories. All of us had similar experiences. David remembered hiding under his desk in kindergarten, wishing he could disappear when the teacher called on him. Maya talked about feeling like she was performing her own life, watching herself from outside her body. Rebecca had been fascinated by ghost stories as a child. Helen had always felt like she was observing life rather than living it. We were all observers, all outsiders, all people who had never felt fully real in the first place. What if, Helen said, what if we're not disappearing? What if we're finally becoming what we always were? The question hung in the air between us. 7 semi-transparent people in a basement that officially didn't exist, asking ourselves if we'd ever really existed at all. Maya started crying. I don't want to be a ghost. Maybe, Rebecca said softly, we get to choose what kind of ghost we become. I've been thinking about that conversation for hours. About choice. About the moment when invisibility stops being something that happens to you and starts being something you are. I'm still here. Still fading. Writing this on a laptop in a 24-hour diner where the staff has learned to ignore the typing sounds from the empty booth in the corner. I don't know if anyone will see these words. Don't know if they'll last any longer than I will, but if you're reading this, if somehow this story survived when I couldn't, then maybe I'm not completely gone. Maybe impossible things can leave marks. Maybe we exist as long as someone, somewhere, remembers the space we left behind. The others are further along now. David reached stage 4 yesterday. His apartment complex has no record of him ever living there. Maya hit stage 5 this morning. She can still think, still feel, but she can't touch anything anymore. Her hand passes through everything, even other transparent people. Rebecca thinks she's approaching stage 6. She's been flickering in and out of existence, disappearing for minutes at a time before snapping back into our shared reality. It's peaceful, she told us. Like letting go of a breath you've been holding your whole life. Oh, and I see myself clearly now. More clearly than when I was solid. See all the ways I was already transparent. Going through motions. Letting life happen around me instead of to me. Maybe that's the real horror. Not that we can become invisible, but that some of us already were. If you've made it this far, do me a favor. Leave a comment. Tell me you can see these words. Tell me I existed, even if just for the length of this story, because tomorrow I might be gone completely, and the day after that, you might not even remember reading this. But tonight, I'm still here. Still impossible. Still me. And I can see others starting to fade. Can you see them too? Or are you next? Check your hands, right now. Look at them in the light. Do they seem solid? Really solid? Or is there something off? A shimmer at the edges? A transparency you hadn't noticed before? Have you ever felt like you were going through the motions of your life? Like you were watching yourself from the outside? Like you were already becoming transparent to the world around you? Have people been looking through you lately? Forgetting conversations you just had? Acting like you weren't there even when you were standing right in front of them? Share this story, while you still can, while people can still see you posted. Because once the fading starts, well, you already know how it ends. But maybe, if enough people read this, if enough people remember us, we won't disappear completely. Maybe we'll exist in the spaces between words, in the pauses between thoughts, in the moments when you feel like you're not quite alone. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us ever really were, sweet dreams. If you're experiencing any of the symptoms described in this story, please know that you're not alone. There are others like us, and we see you even when the world doesn't. Look for the signs. Listen for the whispers. We're still here, in the spaces between. And remember, being invisible doesn't mean being powerless. Sometimes the most important work is done by those no one can see. Stay strong, stay aware, and whatever you do, don't stop believing in your own existence. We are still here. Story number 3. The first thing I noticed was the sunrise in the bathroom window, while the kitchen window showed midnight. That should have been my warning to leave, but I was desperate. 3 months behind on rent in Denver, no family to turn to, and winter closing in fast. When I found the listing for a fully furnished apartment in Aurora for only $400 a month, I didn't ask questions. I should have. Now I'm trapped here, writing this on my phone while something scratches at my bedroom door. The window beside me shows a blood-red sunset that's been frozen at 7:43 p.m. for the past 6 hours. But I know it's actually 3 a.m. because my phone still works. For now, if you're listening to this, if someone finds this recording, don't come looking for me. And whatever you do, never rent apartment 4B at Willowbrook Commons. The windows here don't just show different times, they show different worlds. But wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it started. Maybe you'll see the signs I missed. Maybe you'll be smarter than me. The story begins now. Tuesday morning, October 15th. I stood outside Willowbrook Commons, clutching the newspaper ad like it was a lifeline. The building looked normal enough. Faded red brick, probably built in the 70s, 5 stories with those metal balconies nobody ever uses. The kind of place where people mind their own business. Perfect. Or so I thought. Looking back now, there were signs. The way birds avoided the building entirely. Not a single pigeon on the roof. Not a sparrow on the window ledges. Even the trees planted around the property seemed to lean away from it, like they were trying to escape but couldn't uproot themselves. The property manager, Mrs. Chen, met me in the lobby. She was maybe 60, wore thick glasses that made her eyes look huge, and moved with this weird, careful way, like she was walking through a minefield. The lobby itself felt wrong. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and conversation stops? Like that, except there was nobody else there. Just this heavy silence that seemed to press against my eardrums. The air tasted stale, recycled, like it had been breathed by too many people for too many years. "You're here for 4B?" she asked, and I swear her voice cracked a little. "Yes, ma'am. Is it still available?" She studied me for a long moment. Her eyes behind those thick glasses didn't blink. Not once. I counted the seconds. 5, 10, 15. "You're alone?" "Yeah, just me." "No pets?" "No, ma'am." "No children visiting?" That struck me as odd, but I shook my head. "Nope. Like I said, just me." "Good," she whispered, then caught herself. "I mean, the apartment is small, not suitable for families." She reached into her purse, vintage leather, cracked with age, and pulled out a key. Not a modern key card or even a normal key. This thing was old. Brass, heavy. The kind of key you'd see in an antique shop. It was warm to the touch, like someone had been holding it. But her hands were cold when our fingers brushed. "4th floor," she said. "Take the stairs. Elevators..." Broken. I glanced at the elevator. The doors were new, shiny. The display showed it sitting at the 3rd floor. The up button glowed invitingly. "How long has it been broken?" "Always," she said quickly. "I mean, for years. We just haven't. It's complicated. Please use the stairs." The stairwell door was one of those heavy fire doors. It groaned when I pulled it open, and the sound echoed up the shaft like a throat clearing. The smell hit me immediately. Old carpet and something else. Something sweet and wrong, like fruit that's just starting to rot, or flowers at a funeral home. That cloying sweetness that tries to cover decay, but only makes it worse. My footsteps echoed too loud, and I could have sworn I heard other footsteps matching mine. But every time I stopped, they stopped too. Not instantly. There was always a half-second delay, like someone was trying to match my rhythm but couldn't quite get it right. 2nd floor landing. The door had a small window, reinforced with wire mesh. Through it, I could see a hallway identical to the lobby, except the carpet was different, newer. The walls were a different color too, mint green instead of beige. 3rd floor, the carpet here was orange shag straight from the 70s. The walls were wood paneling. It was like climbing through decades. 4th floor. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, casting shadows that moved when I wasn't looking directly at them. The carpet here was deep burgundy, and my feet sank into it with each step. The walls were covered in floral wallpaper that seemed to shift and swirl in my peripheral vision. Apartment 4A had a wreath on the door. Fake autumn leaves and tiny pumpkins, normal. I could hear a TV playing inside. Sounded like a game show. The Price is Right, maybe. Comforting. 4C had a welcome mat. One of those funny ones that said "come back with pizza." Also normal. Music drifted from under the door, classical. Mozart, I think. Between them, 4B had nothing. Just a door that looked heavier than the others. Older. The wood was different, darker, with a grain that seemed to move like flowing water. The brass numbers were tarnished, and this peephole was covered with black tape from the inside. Around the doorframe, the wallpaper was peeling. Underneath, I could see older wallpaper, and under that, what looked like another layer. Like geological strata, like time itself had accumulated in layers around this door. I knocked first. Don't know why. Habit, I guess. The sound was weird, muffled, like knocking on a door with a room full of cotton behind it. Or water. Or nothing at all. No answer, obviously. But then, I heard something. Not from inside the apartment. From the door itself. A vibration. Like it was humming at a frequency just below hearing. I put my hand flat against the wood and felt it. A pulse, rhythmic, almost like... "It's empty," Mrs. Chen said from behind me. I hadn't heard her follow me up, hadn't heard her on the stairs at all, but there she was, not even breathing heavy from the climb. Been empty for some time. How long? Does it matter? It's available now. The key turned smooth as butter, too smooth, like the lock had been oiled recently or used often, or like the lock wanted to open. The tumblers fell into place with tiny sighs of relief. I pushed the door open and walked into the most beautiful apartment I'd ever seen. It shouldn't have been possible. The building was old, run down, but this apartment, it was like stepping into a different world. Hardwood floors that gleamed like honey. Exposed brick walls that looked freshly sandblasted. A kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances that belonged in a house 3 times this price. The living room had built-in bookshelves and a brick fireplace. The shelves were full of books. Leather-bound classics, modern paperbacks, textbooks from different decades all mixed together. Above the fireplace hung a painting of a window showing a sunset. I remember thinking how meta that was, a painting of a window in a room with actual windows. "Fully furnished," Mrs. Chen said from behind me. She hadn't entered the apartment, stood right at the threshold like there was an invisible barrier. Previous tenant left everything: bed, couch, dishes, even some food in the fridge. Why would someone leave all this? I walked to the kitchen window. Outside, the morning sun painted the parking lot gold. The trees swayed in a breeze I couldn't feel. Must have been around 9 a.m. Perfect light for a kitchen. The kind of light that makes you want to cook breakfast and read the paper. "Personal emergency," she said quickly. "Had to leave, suddenly." "What kind of emergency?" "The kind that makes you leave everything behind," she said. And there was something in her voice. A warning, a plea, a prayer. I should have pushed, should have asked more questions. But I was mesmerized by the apartment. After sleeping in my car for 2 weeks, after showering at the gym and eating dollar menu meals, after having my whole life fit in a duffel bag, it looked like paradise. The bathroom had a clawfoot tub. When was the last time you saw one of those in a regular apartment? The bedroom had a 4-poster bed with actual curtains. The closet was walk-in. Everything was clean, perfect, like it was waiting just for me. $400 a month? I asked, still not believing it. First month, last month, and security deposit. $1,200 total to move in. Cash only. I had exactly $1,300 to my name. It was like this place was meant for me, like it knew exactly what I could afford and had priced itself accordingly. Why so cheap? A place like this should be... "The owner has specific requirements," she interrupted. "The price reflects those requirements. Are you interested or not?" "What requirements?" She pulled out a rental agreement. Thick. Way thicker than normal. Standard stuff, mostly. Few special clauses. You can read it all, of course. I flipped through it. Most of it was indeed standard, but there were additions handwritten in the margins. Different handwriting, different ink colors, like multiple people had added rules over the years. One section was highlighted in yellow. Tenant agrees to maintain all window coverings in their current positions. Tenant will not remove, adjust, or interfere with any window treatments. Tenant acknowledges that windows in Unit 4B are specialty installations for aesthetic purposes only. "Aesthetic purposes?" I asked. "The windows are unique, tinted, part of the apartment's charm, you understand?" I walked to the living room window. The sunset light was beautiful, casting everything in gold and amber. But now that I was looking closer, I could see it was wrong. The shadows outside were pointing the wrong direction for sunset. And the sun itself, it wasn't moving. I watched for a full minute. The sun just hung there, frozen in the sky. "Is this some kind of screen?" I asked. "Does it matter?" Mrs. Chen countered. You have light, beautiful light. The windows work. They show you outside just differently. But 400 a month, she repeated. Where else will you find that? With furniture? With appliances? With everything you need? She was right. I couldn't afford to be picky. And really, who cared if the windows were weird? I had windows. I had walls. I had a door that locked. I'll take it. Mrs. Chen's face did something complicated. Relief mixed with guilt, pity, fear. All of them at once, creating an expression I'd never seen before. Like someone watching a car accident in slow motion, knowing they should stop it but unable to move. She handed me the rental agreement and a pen. The pen was warm too. Everything she touched seemed to hold heat. 3 rules, she said as I signed my name. 1. Never touch the window coverings. 2. If you hear knocking after midnight, don't answer. 3. She paused, seemed to reconsider, then shook her head. Just those 2. That's all. Nothing else. Welcome to Willowbrook. But I saw her lips keep moving, forming words she didn't speak. Words I couldn't quite read, but somehow understood. 3. Don't look for the others. She counted the cash twice before stuffing it into her purse. Her hands shook slightly. The bills were damp with my sweat, but she didn't seem to notice, or didn't care. Rent is due on the 1st, she said, backing toward the door. Slip it under the office door. Don't wait for a receipt. Don't knock. Just slide it under and go. What about maintenance? If something breaks? Nothing breaks in 4B, she said. Everything fixes itself. That doesn't make sense. Neither do the windows, she said. But here we are. She left fast, almost running. Her footsteps in the hallway sounded wrong, too many of them, like she had more than 2 feet, or like the hallway was echoing them back multiplied. I stood in my new apartment, spinning in a slow circle, taking it all in. The afternoon light through the living room window was perfect, warm, golden, made the whole place glow like it was lit from within. I was so happy I didn't notice. The kitchen window still showed morning, bright, cheerful morning with birds that never moved and clouds that never drifted. I didn't notice that the painting above the fireplace, the one showing a sunset, was displaying the exact same sunset as the living room window. Same clouds, same angle of light. Like the painting was a mirror, I didn't notice that the books on the shelves had impossible publication dates, a Stephen King novel from 2027, a cookbook from 1962 sitting next to its own revised edition from 1958, a diary with entries from next week. I didn't notice any of it. I was home. I spent the first day just enjoying having a roof over my head. Took a real shower. Hot water that didn't run out after 3 minutes like at the truck stop. Cooked a real meal on a real stove. Slept in a real bed with sheets that smelled like lavender. The second day, I started noticing things. It began when I woke up at 2 a.m. needing water. Stumbled to the kitchen in the dark, filled a glass from the tap. The kitchen window caught my eye. Outside, the parking lot was bright with noon sunshine. Cars gleamed. A woman walked her dog across the blazing asphalt. I rubbed my eyes. Looked at my phone. 2:07 a.m. Looked out the window again. Still noon. The woman with the dog was gone, but the sun hadn't moved. Straight overhead. Shadows pooled directly beneath cars. Weird dream, I thought. Went back to bed. The next morning, or what my phone claimed was morning, I made coffee and started really looking at the windows. The kitchen still showed noon. Had to be some kind of film or something, right? Special tinting that created an illusion. I walked to the living room. That window showed a perfect golden hour sunset. Beautiful. The kind of light photographers call magic hour. I stood there for 10 minutes waiting for it to change. It didn't. The bathroom window showed sunrise, soft pink and orange streaking across clouds. Pretty, but wrong. All wrong. The bedroom window was the worst. Deep twilight. Not quite full dark, but that unsettling in-between time when shadows get long and strange. The street lights were just starting to flicker on. I tried to open the kitchen window. It wouldn't budge. Not stuck. It was like the frame was solid, decorative. I checked the others, same thing. Windows that looked like windows but were really just pictures. Screens, I couldn't tell. The curtains wouldn't move either. They looked like regular curtains, fabric, hanging from normal rods. But when I tried to slide them, it was like trying to move a wall. They were fixed in place, part of the window somehow. Specialty installations, Mrs. Chen had said. Aesthetic purposes. I wanted to call her, demand an explanation, but I didn't have her number. The rental agreement just had a P.O. box for sending rent. I went downstairs to the manager's office, but it was locked. Sign on the door said by appointment only with no phone number. I knocked on VA. The lady with the autumn wreath answered, elderly, wearing a housecoat covered in cats. "Excuse me," I started. "I just moved in next door and—" Her face went white. She looked past me at my door, then slammed hers shut. I heard multiple locks clicking into place. I tried 4C. No answer, though I could hear a TV playing inside. Back in my apartment, I did the only thing I could think of. I Googled Willowbrook Commons Apartment 4B. Nothing. Well, not nothing. Lots of hits for Willowbrook Commons, but specifically searching for apartment 4B got 0 results. Like it didn't exist. I tried variations. Willowbrook Commons Strange Windows. Aurora, Colorado apartment building weird time. Apartment windows showing different times of day. Nothing useful. Just regular apartment reviews. Nobody mentioning anything strange. That night, I hung blankets over the windows. Couldn't stand looking at that frozen sunset in the living room anymore. The pushpins went into the wall easy enough, but when I tried to hang the blanket, it wouldn't stay. Slid right off like the window was coated in oil. The pushpins fell out too, leaving no holes. Like the wall healed itself. I tried tape, slid off. Tried propping a bookshelf in front of the bedroom window. When I woke up, it was back against the wall where I'd found it. The windows wanted to be seen. That's when the knocking started. 3 a.m. 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. If you hear knocking after midnight, don't answer. I lay in bed, staring at the twilight outside my bedroom window, and waited. The knock had woken me from a dream. Or maybe I was still dreaming. In the dream, I'd been looking out the kitchen window at noon, watching the shadows under the cars. The shadows had been moving, crawling, reaching toward the building like fingers. 3 more knocks. Harder this time. The sound seemed to come from inside the wood itself. I crept to the door, bare feet silent on the hardwood. The floor was cold. Too cold. Like walking on ice. My breath came out in visible puffs which made no sense. The apartment was warm. Had been warm. But near the door, the temperature dropped 20 degrees. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was dark. No, not dark, empty. Like looking into a void. The peephole showed absolutely nothing, which was impossible. There should at least be the opposite wall. The ugly floral wallpaper, the flickering fluorescent light. Instead, there was just absence. A nothing so complete it hurt to look at. "Hello?" A woman's voice, soft, familiar. Like my sister's voice, but my sister lived in Seattle. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I used to live here. I think I left something important." I almost answered. My hand was on the deadbolt before I caught myself. The metal was frost-cold, burning my fingers. "Please," the voice continued. It was definitely my sister now. But wrong, like someone doing an impression. getting the tone right but missing something essential. It's in the bedroom closet, behind the panel. I really need it back. It's my insulin. I'm diabetic, you understand? My sister wasn't diabetic. I know you're listening, the voice said. Closer now, like lips pressed against the door. I could hear breathing, wet, ragged. The windows showed you, didn't they? All those different times? Do you know what that means yet? I backed away from the door. The breathing got louder, multiplied, like there were dozens of mouths pressed against the wood. You will, she whispered, but it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a chorus, multiple voices, all slightly out of sync. When the windows start changing, you'll understand. But by then, you'll be one of us, part of the collection, part of the circulation. Footsteps, moving away, but the sound was wrong. Too many feet, or the same feet walking away in multiple directions at once. I counted to 100 before looking through the peephole again. Still that impossible void. But now there was something in the void, a shape. Human-sized, but wrong. It stood perfectly still, facing my door. Waiting. I watched it for an hour. It never moved, never breathed. Just stood there in that non-space, patient as stone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Sat on the couch with all the lights on, watching the windows. The kitchen progressed from noon to late afternoon. The living room sunset deepened to purple. The bedroom twilight grew darker, stars appearing in impossible constellations. The next day. Was it day? My phone said it was, but I couldn't trust it anymore. I examined the bedroom closet. I'd been avoiding it since the voice mentioned the panel, but I had to know. Nothing special about it at first glance, just a standard closet with a rod for hangers and a shelf up top. The previous tenant's clothes were still there. Different sizes, different styles, like multiple people's wardrobes had been combined. A sundress next to a man's suit next to a child's raincoat. I knocked on the back wall. Sounded normal, pushed on it, solid. But in the back corner, barely visible under a pile of shoes that weren't there the day before, was a seam. I dug my fingernails into it, pulled. A small panel popped open. The space behind it was deeper than it should have been. The beam from my phone's flashlight didn't find a back wall, just kept going into darkness. Sitting right at the edge were a leather journal and an old flashlight. The flashlight was still on, though the batteries should have died years ago. Its beam was weak, yellowish, and it pointed down into that impossible depth. The journal's first page had a woman's handwriting. If you're reading this, you're in 4B. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I tried to warn people, but no one believes. The windows aren't windows. They're doors. And sometimes things come through. I flipped through pages of increasingly frantic entries. October 1st, moved in. Beautiful apartment. Windows are weird, but whatever. Found previous tenant's journal in kitchen drawer. Threw it away. Wish I'd read it. October 5th. Kitchen window changed. Was noon, now showing 3 p.m. Landlord says it's normal. Says the building adjusts to its tenants. What does that mean? October 9th. Woke up to find furniture rearranged. Thought someone broke in, but door was still locked. The couch faced the sunset window. All the chairs faced the windows, like they wanted me to watch. October 12th. They all changed. Living room is midnight now. Bathroom shows sunset. I see shapes moving outside that shouldn't be there. People walking on air. Birds flying backward. A dog that walks through the same spot over and over, like a loop. October 15th. Found more journals, hidden everywhere. Under floorboards. Inside walls. Decades of them, all saying the same thing. The building eats time. The windows are mouths. October 18th. Something knocked. sounded like my mother. But my mother died 3 years ago. It knew things only she would know, about my childhood, about the scar on my knee, about the lullaby she used to sing. October 20th. The man in the twilight window has been there for 3 days. Just standing, watching. He's wearing a suit from the 50s and a digital watch. His face keeps changing. Young, old. Young, old. Like he's cycling through ages. October 23rd. The man in the twilight window watches me sleep. He's getting clearer. Last night I could see his eyes. They were my eyes. He was me, an older me, or younger, or both. October 25th. They're in the walls, I can hear them moving. All the previous tenants. All the people who got stuck between times. The building doesn't let go. It collects. It preserves. It feeds. October 27th. Tried to break a window. Hammer went right through like it wasn't there. But I can't follow. There's something in the way. Something that won't let me cross. October 30th. They're coming through. I can hear them in the walls, in the space between times. I'm leaving everything. Just run. Don't pack. Run. The last entry was just 2 words, written in what looked like blood. He's inside. I dropped the journal. There were pages stuck to the back cover. Photographs. Polaroids. All showing the same apartment, my apartment, but in different decades. Different furniture, different people, but always the same windows, always showing the wrong times. In one photo, a family of 4 smiled at the camera. Behind them, the kitchen window showed midnight. The timestamp on the photo said 2:15 p.m., June 1987. In another, an elderly man sat in the same chair I'd sat in that morning. The sunset window behind him showed noon. His eyes were empty. Not metaphorically, actually empty. Just black holes where eyes should be. The last photo was recent. Digital, printed on regular paper. It showed the previous tenant. A woman about my age. She was standing by the bedroom window, and in the twilight outside, a figure stood watching. The figure looked exactly like her. I ran to the living room window, still sunset, but now there were 2 suns. One setting, one rising, occupying the same space. The shadows outside were going in 2 directions at once. Kitchen, still afternoon, but the sun was moving, jumping, like a film with missing frames. 3 p.m., 5 p.m., 2 p.m., 6 p.m., time stuttering. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. You read the journal. That was a mistake. They know. You know now. I texted back, who is this? Sarah, previous tenant. Still in building. Can't leave. None of us can. Windows won't let us. What do you mean? Where are you? Apartment 4B. Just not your 4B. The 4B from 6 months ago. We're all here. All the 4Bs. Stacked on top of each other like transparent slides. That's impossible. Check your door. I walked to the front door. My hand hesitated on the deadbolt. The metal was warm now. Too warm. Like it had been sitting in the sun. But there was no sun in the hallway. I turned the deadbolt, pulled. The door opened about 3 inches, then stopped. Like hitting an invisible wall. I pushed harder. Nothing. Slammed my shoulder into it. The door should have swung wide. There was nothing blocking it. But it wouldn't move past those 3 inches. Through the gap, I could see the hallway. Except it wasn't the hallway I remembered. This one was longer, darker. The carpet was different, older, with strange stains that looked like footprints. Burnt footprints, like someone had been walking with feet on fire. The walls were wrong too, covered in doors. Dozens of doors, all labeled 4B, all identical to mine. Some were open, showing glimpses of my apartment, but wrong. Different furniture, different light, different times, and at the far end, barely visible in the shifting light, someone stood watching. They waved. Then another figure joined them, then another. Soon the hallway was full of people, all waving, all wearing different era clothing, all with my face. I slammed the door shut, locked it. My hands were shaking so bad it took 3 tries. My phone buzzed again. What's happening? The windows aren't synced to our time anymore. Building exists in multiple times at once. We're stuck between them, sorry. Tried to warn you through Mrs. Chen, but she needs the rent money. Has to keep feeding tenants to the building. Feeding? How do you think it stays connected to all those different times? It needs anchors, living anchors. Welcome to the collection. You're the newest battery. This is insane. Try calling someone, anyone. See what happens. I tried calling 911. The call wouldn't connect, not busy, not out of service, just nothing. Like the number didn't exist. Tried my mom. Same thing. Tried pizza delivery. The phone rang, but the voice that answered was speaking a language I didn't recognize. Not foreign, not human, just sounds. Wet, clicking sounds. Phone only works in building now. You can talk to other tenants, other versions, other times. But outside, you're already gone. Erased. The building ate your timeline. The sun in the kitchen window jumped again, now showing maybe 5 p.m. But through the glass, I could see myself. Standing in the parking lot. Looking up. The hammer connected with the twilight window. The sound wasn't like breaking glass. It was like tearing fabric, like reality itself ripping. The window didn't shatter, it dissolved, melted, and through the gaps, time poured in. Not just one time, all times. Every moment that had ever existed in 4B flooded through at once. I saw myself moving in on 1,000 different days, cooking breakfast in 100 different kitchens, dying in dozens of different ways, being born again. Always in 4B, always the same soul. The man in the twilight stepped through the dissolving window. But he wasn't just one man anymore. He was all of us. Every version that had ever existed, superimposed. A temporal, double exposure of 1,000 lives. Welcome, he said, and his voice was my voice multiplied. To the circulation. The apartment exploded, not with fire or force, with time. The walls became transparent, showing every version of 4B that had ever existed. Victorian parlor, 60s crash pad, 80s studio, modern minimalism, all occupying the same space, all real. I could see through the floors, through the ceilings. The entire building was like this, every apartment existing in every time, and in each one, versions of me. Different faces, different bodies, but the same soul. The same temporal signature. All of us feeding the engine. Do you understand now? The man who was me asked. We're not prisoners. We're the prison itself. The building doesn't trap us. We are the building. Our consciousness, spread across time, is what keeps it stable. I fell to my knees. The shattered time from the window swirled around me like snow. Each flake was a memory, a moment, a life. I could feel them all, remember them all, every time I'd moved into 4B, every time I'd discovered the truth, every time I'd made this choice. How many times? I whispered. There is no count, he said. We exist outside of linear time now. We've always been here. We'll always be here, past, present, future. They're just rooms in the building. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah, but I could see her now, standing in her version of 4B, typing, You did it, you're scattering. How does it feel? I tried to respond, but my hands were becoming transparent. I could see through them to other versions of my hands. Young hands, old hands, hands that hadn't been born yet. The building needs us, the man continued. Without us, time collapses. Reality becomes chaos. We're the pillars holding up the universe. But why us? I managed to ask. Why this building? Why 4B? He smiled, that horrible, knowing smile. Because this is where it started. 1978. The original experiment. The government was trying to create a temporal observation post, a way to see all times at once. But they needed an anchor, a consciousness that could exist in multiple times without going insane. He gestured to the dissolving walls. They found us. Or rather, they found the first us. The original, she volunteered. Thought she was serving her country, but the experiment went wrong. Instead of observing time, she became stuck in it, spread across it, and the building. The building became addicted to her temporal energy. Mrs. Chen, I breathed. The first and the last, he nodded. She exists outside the loop because she is the loop, the alpha and omega. She feeds the building new versions of herself to keep it stable, each one thinking they're unique, each one discovering the truth, each one making the choice. I could feel myself spreading, my consciousness stretching across decades. I was the child who would grow up to rent 4B. I was the old man who would die in 4B. I was everyone in between. Can it be stopped? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Stop it, and time stops, he said. The building is a temporal linchpin now. Remove it, and the past and future collapse into an eternal present. No growth, no change, no life. The walls were completely transparent now. I could see every resident of Willowbrook Commons, all living their lives unaware that their building existed in multiple times, unaware that their stability depended on the battery in 4B. So, we're heroes, I said bitterly. We're necessities, he corrected. The universe found a way to prevent its own heat death. It created a temporal loop that generates infinite energy, and we're the fuel. My body was fading, becoming one with the building. I could feel every pipe, every wire, every brick. Could feel the other versions of me settling into their times. Past me accepting the apartment. Future me warning the next version. All of us playing our parts. There is one thing, the man said as he began to fade too. One small mercy. What? We dream. When we're fully integrated, when we're part of the circulation. We dream, all of us together. A shared consciousness experiencing every possible life, every possible moment. It's beautiful in its way. I felt the pull, the building calling me home, my scattered timeline consolidating into the engine. Soon, I'd be like Mrs. Chen, aware but not aware, existing in all times but belonging to none. Any last questions? The man asked. Just one, I said. The person who'll rent 4B next, the next me. What should I tell them? He smiled. The truth, always the truth. Hidden in journals, whispered through walls, shown in windows. They'll figure it out, they always do. And they'll make the same choice, they always do. And if they don't, then they're not us, he said simply. And the building will reject them, spit them out. Wait for the next version, the next iteration, the next fuel. I was almost gone now, just a whisper of consciousness spread across time. I could see my phone on the floor, still recording, still documenting. The last journal entry of this version of me. See you soon, the man said. Or long ago. Or right now. Time is circular here. Every ending is a beginning. He stepped back through the window that was no longer there, back into the twilight that was every time at once. And I followed, not because I wanted to, because I had to, because I'd always been there. The apartment reformed around my absence, walls solidified. Windows showed their frozen times again. Kitchen at noon, living room at sunset, bathroom at sunrise, bedroom at twilight. Waiting for the next me. Always waiting. Recording ends. Phone found in apartment 4B on November 1st. Unit was empty. Windows showed normal views. Apartment currently available for rent. $400 month. Utilities included. Please contact Mrs. Chen for viewing. But wait, I'm still here, still conscious, still aware, spread across every moment of the building's existence, but still me, still thinking, still warning. You see, that's the real horror. We don't disappear. We don't die. We become eternal, conscious fragments scattered across time, aware of every loop, every cycle, every version of ourselves, making the same discoveries, the same choices. I'm in the walls now, in the pipes, in the electrical current that powers the lights. I'm the creak in the floorboards and the settle of the foundation. I'm every whisper you hear at night and every shadow that moves when it shouldn't. And I'm waiting for you, because you're out there somewhere. Another version of me, another iteration. Maybe you're listening to this right now, thinking it's just a story, just fiction. Check your apartment listings. Look for the too good to be true deals, the furnished units that nobody talks about, the windows that show the wrong times. When you find it, and you will find it, you always do. Remember this. The building is hungry, always hungry, and it knows your temporal signature. It's been calling you across time, across dimensions, across every possible reality. You'll answer. You always answer. Because you're me and I'm you. And we're all just fuel for the engine that keeps time running. Welcome to Willowbrook Commons. Welcome to 4B. Welcome home. You've always been here. Wait, do you hear that? That scratching sound? Is that coming from your window? What time does your clock say? What time does your window show? Check them now. And if they don't match, if they show different times, if the sun is in the wrong position or the shadows fall the wrong way, run. Or don't, it doesn't matter. The building is patient, the building is eternal. And somewhere, somewhen, there's a version of you walking up those stairs, holding that brass key, opening that door for the first time. The cycle continues. The engine runs. Time marches on. Fed by us. Fed by you. Fed by the souls caught between the moments, forever circulating through the eternal now of apartment 4B. What did you think happened to me? Am I still trapped there? Still watching through windows that show every time except now? Or am I standing outside your window right this moment, waiting for the times to sink? The truth is all of the above. I'm everywhere, every when. Everyone who's ever lived in 4B and everyone who ever will. We're a collective consciousness now, experiencing all time simultaneously, and we're growing. With each new iteration, each new version that moves in and makes the choice, we become more complete. Soon, we'll be everyone. Every soul will eventually find their way to 4B. The building will grow, spread. Other apartments will begin showing wrong times. Other buildings will join the network. Because this isn't about one building. It's about evolution. Humanity's next step. Existence beyond linear time. We're becoming something new, something necessary, something eternal, and it starts with you. Listening to this. Wondering if it's real. Check your windows. Check them now. What time do they show? Leave a comment below if your windows are showing the wrong time. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories from the spaces between moments. Share this with someone who lives alone, especially if they're looking for an apartment, especially if they're desperate, especially if they're you. They need to know what to watch for. The windows are never just windows. Time is never just time. And you're never just you. Not anymore. Not in 4B. Not in the circulation. Welcome home. Tried everything. Covered the windows with paint. It disappeared by morning. Tried breaking them with a hammer. The hammer passed right through like they weren't there. Tried to tear up the lease agreement. The paper reformed in my hands. The other tenants text me sometimes. The previous woman from 4B, a man who had it in the 90s, a family from the 80s who made the mistake of bringing their kids. They're all still here, scattered through different times in the building, trapped between moments. They tell me things. The building is hungry. It feeds on temporal displacement. We're the batteries that keep it running. When the windows fully sink, you'll slip through. Don't let them sink, but they're sinking anyway. The kitchen is catching up to real time. The living room is falling back. They're all converging on a single moment, the twilight moment, that in-between time when reality is thinnest. The man in the window told me what happens then, not with words, but I understood. When all the windows show the same time, that's when the doors open. All of them. And everyone who's been collected over the years comes through at once. We become part of the building's circulation system, moving through time like blood through veins, keeping it alive, keeping it hungry. Mrs. Chen texts me sometimes too. Apologies, explanations. The building was supposed to be demolished in 1978, but it made a deal, fed itself, learned to exist in multiple times simultaneously to avoid destruction. As long as it has tenants, it can't be torn down, can't be stopped. She's not the real property manager. She's the first tenant, from 1978, still collecting rent, still feeding the building, still looking exactly the same because time doesn't touch her anymore. How many? I asked her once. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Hard to count when they're scattered across so many decades. You'll see them all soon. The windows are almost synced now, I can feel it. The air in the apartment is getting thick, like breathing soup. My phone says it's 6:47 p.m. October 31st. The kitchen window shows 6:15. The living room shows 7:20. The bathroom shows 6:30. The bedroom shows 6:46. 1 minute. The man in the twilight presses his face against the glass. I can see others crowding behind him now. So many faces, all waiting. 30 seconds. The cracks in the bedroom window are spreading. I can hear them singing, hymns from decades that haven't happened yet, or happened too long ago to remember. 10 seconds. I'm writing this last part as fast as I can, uploading it to every platform I can access. Maybe the internet exists outside of time. Maybe someone will see this. Maybe... The kitchen window just clicked to 6:47. The living room followed. The bathroom. They're all showing the same time now, all showing twilight. The man in the bedroom window is smiling so wide his face is splitting. Behind him, I can see myself. Hundreds of versions of myself. All the moments I'll spend here, stretched across eternity. The glass is opening like water. They're coming through. If you're reading this, remember what I said. Don't come looking for me. Don't rent apartment 4B. The windows there don't just show different times. They show all the times you'll be trapped. Forever. And now, so do I. Recording ends. Phone found in apartment 4B on November 1st. Unit was empty. Windows showed normal views. Apartment currently available for rent. $400 month. Utilities included. Please contact Mrs. Chen for viewing. Wait, do you hear that? That scratching sound? Is that coming from your window? What time does your clock say? What time does your window show? Check them. Check them now. And if they don't match, run. What did you think happened to me? Am I still trapped there? Still watching through windows that show every time except now? Or am I standing outside your window right this moment? waiting for the times to sync. Leave a comment below if your windows are showing the wrong time. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories from the spaces between moments. Share this with someone who lives alone. They need to know what to watch for. The windows are never just windows. Not anymore. Now, sleep. Or at least, try to. It's quiet now. Too quiet, but not empty. That feeling crawling up your spine, that weight pressing on your chest, that's not your imagination. You're not alone. There's something behind the curtain. You haven't looked, not because you forgot, but because you're afraid to know. You heard the whisper, soft where wet, wrong. Like breath dragged across broken glass. But you told yourself it was the wind, didn't you? That lie made you feel safe. Temporarily. Let me ask you, does the wind whisper your name? Does the wind tap lightly, again and again, from the same spot behind the curtain every night? Does the wind leave scratches on your window that weren't there this morning? Thin, sharp, like claws, like warnings. You don't remember opening the window. You never open the window. But it's unlocked now. You could check, you could stand up, you could walk over and pull the curtain back. But you won't, because you know. You know what's waiting, not because you've seen it, but because you felt it. In the quiet, in the dark. Every time you close your eyes, every time you wake up and your blanket is just slightly moved. Your door slightly cracked. You try to explain it. Your mind wants to explain it. But that whisper, that sound that only comes when you're alone, when everything is still, when the night is at its deepest, that's not a dream, that's a presence. It doesn't want your fear, it wants your attention. It feeds on the moment you doubt yourself. The second you wonder if you heard something, the instant your heart rate rises. That's when it leans closer. It's been patient, watching, learning you like prey. You ever notice it never shows up when the lights are on, when someone's in the room? It waits for the ritual, the brushing of your teeth, the turning off of lights, the last look at your phone, the deep breath just before sleep. That's when it wakes up. That's when it stirs behind the curtain. Sometimes it watches you all night. Sometimes it moves. A shift in the shadow. A faint creak on the floorboards. The sound of fabric sliding over skin. And when you don't check, when you ignore it, that's when it comes closer. Not fast, not loud, just closer. You might feel a cold spot on the bed. You might feel breath on your neck. You might hear a whisper in your ear that sounds almost like your voice. It copies, it mimics, it blends, not to confuse you, to prepare you, because soon it won't need the curtain, it won't need shadows, it will sit beside you, stand behind you, speak through you. You won't even know when it happens. You'll wake up, look in the mirror, and something will be off. Your eyes won't blink quite right, your smile will linger too long. Your reflection will move just a little after you do. And the people around you? They'll say you seem different. Not worse, just not you. But tonight you're still you. Still in control, for now. You could still check. You could still confront it. Pull the curtain back, face it, but deep down, you've already made your choice. You won't. Because you'd rather lie still, let your eyes drift shut, and hope sleep comes quickly. And it will. But what you wake up as might not be the same. Now, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You're not just a viewer, you're part of something bigger. Something that watches with you, that sits beside you as you watch, as you listen, as you wait. Because this story doesn't end when the screen fades to black. It follows you into the next room, into your dreams, into your reflection. If you liked this story, like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss the next one, so we don't miss you. And comment below. Tell us the moment you stopped feeling alone. We're watching, we're listening, and we read everything. Now, go ahead, Gain the courage to check the dark corners before you sleep. Turn off the lights, close your eyes, sleep well, if you can. Listen the whispers and make a decision whether we are going to cooperate with the whispers or we just want to skip them. But actually, no one can skip these whispers. If you walk away from them, they will run towards you until they reach you. They confront you, make you pay, make you suffer the same thing they suffer. There is no escape from them. If you want to escape, help them, so they can have peace, and you also can have it. Help, or you will ask for help soon. So, the end of today's video has arrived. Share your personal horror experiences in the comments. Also, comment the part of the story that you find the most horror and terrifying. If you like this video, leave a like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Also, ring the bell icon so you don't miss the upcoming videos. Remember, don't run from whispers, because they follow you. They know you. They want you to listen, just confront them. Now, sleep well, or should I say, have a haunted night.